here with Dan Mangena. Such a pleasure, Dan. And we were talking a bit off air. You're a fellow Brit, just like me. So brings back a lot of memories.
For sure.
So right now you're in Italy, which I'm a little jealous of, but you're in the process of relocating to Dubai. Can we start with that? Because I always find it so unusual when either American or British nationals are in different countries, the story of how they got there.
Yeah, so the funny thing is that I've been trying to relocate from the UK since 2012. And every time I went to relocate, something went sideways. I remember my consulting company that I ran before what I do now, we started getting some work for a couple of people in the Sierra Leone government. My godmum was friends with ministers. And so I was getting some consulting work, working for some departments out there. And I really loved my time in West Africa. My family's from Zimbabwe. My parents emigrated from Zimbabwe to the UK in the 70s. And so I'd always kind of been familiar with one part of the continent, but now I started to get a whole new vibe and culture and everything from the other side. Sierra Leone, Freetown's really beautiful. It's on the coast. So you've got this beautiful Atlantic Ocean and you've got lovely beaches. And to top it all off, you can get like a beautiful 4-bedroom house on the beach for like £2,000, £3,000 for the year. You can get a chef, you can get a driver. I'm like, this is what I need to do. But then, of course, that was the year that Ebola hit. So that didn't really work out. Then I went to move to Dubai the first time. I was seeing a girl. She says, "Oh, I love you. I want to have a relationship with you. Don't go." So I'd actually packed up and gone to Dubai. I've been there for 6 weeks. She's like, "Oh, I love you. Please, let's just give it a try." So I came back to England. That relationship didn't end up working out. Anyway, I tried another time, and there was some other logistical stuff. And so in May, June of 2018, which is when I started traveling to share my work, which we're going to talk a bit about today. During the course of that time, I ended up in a little place in Mexico called Los Cabos. I was supposed to be there for 3 days. 3 days turned to 10, and I ended up staying. And so I'd lived in Mexico for the last 5 years. My son's mother now wants to relocate to Dubai, so I'm supporting her in that, and I'm moving up everything to Dubai so I can be with my son. Making the move over to Dubai so I can make sure that I get to be with my son every day.
That's incredible. Well, how old is your son?
He's 2.5.
Brother, my son's 2.5 too.
Get out.
it's a great age, right? They're starting to talk back at you, and he's just saying no to everything. Yeah. But that's incredible. So
a little character.
So just logistically, how did you do that with Mexico? Is it easy? Do you need to get visas? Was that difficult?
So pre-COVID, so during COVID, there was an influx of people moving over to Mexico because it was a very flexible place to be. We were able to thrive. I know a lot of people had a very tough time, but we were able to thrive during COVID because we were locked down for about a month, maybe, if that, at the beginning. Other than that, because it's so tourist-driven, they had a lot of strict rules, like reduced capacity, social distancing, but you could get around and you could do your thing. But as more and more people started coming, they started to increase the difficulty to get residency. But before, you come to the border and with a British passport, you automatically get 6 months. And any time you leave for a day, you come back and they give you another 6 months. And so because I was always traveling for work, I kept getting 6 months. My son was born in Mexico. So by proxy, his mum and I automatically got permanent residency. So I've got permanent residency for Mexico now as a result of Ethan. Thank you, son. But before then, it was just leave and come back. During COVID, we couldn't travel, but they were given special dispensation for people who couldn't travel. And so if you've been living there since before, then you could get a stamp in the passport and extend your stay through a lawyer, which wasn't that difficult to do. Cost like £100 or something like that. But other than that, before, British passport, new stamp, and you're good to go.
Awesome. And then how is Dubai? Is that a little trickier?
Dubai is a bit more sophisticated, yes. But as I've been coming to this part of the world for 20 years, so I already had a company out here. And so I was just able to arrange a residency permit. As long as you've got certain types of companies, you can have residency permits for owning a company. So I just went through the process of doing that. Got residency for me. When those guys get over, we're tying up there soon. I'll get her sponsored and get my son sponsored and get them all their visas as well.
That's awesome. One thing you'll never regret is doing all this, like picking up and moving. I just think as you get older, it just gets harder and harder to do. And you seem like you're in an amazing place in your life where you just have this flexibility. So I have to ask, Dan, how financially, like you seem like you have online businesses. Is that right? How do you pay the bills?
Pretty much. So I've got a couple of businesses. My primary time is spent in the personal development business. And the funny thing was, when I made the transition into doing the personal development business, I shut down anything else I was doing. And I wasn't actually being all that entrepreneurial. I was really just focused on just serving. And then a friend of mine, who's become quite a mentor to me, Barry, he kind of said, Dan, if you let the abundance in, you could help some more people. And that's when I started doing more, courses and coaching and stuff. Up until then, I wasn't. I was literally on my savings, flying around the world, renting rooms and begging people to come and hear what I had to say. And so the business side of things has grown significantly. We got a 2 Comma Club award last year. We're on set to do a 10X award, if not this year, then the beginning of next year. For those who don't know, that's with ClickFunnels. If you make a certain number of sales, then and they audit you that you've made those sales, they give you an award for that. 2 Comma Club means that we made at least $1 million. 10X means we've done 10 million. So that's that. But then, my siblings and I are very, very integrated when it comes to growing wealth. We're all very committed to being the generation that creates generational wealth for all of our kids. And we come together to do that. And so we've got enterprises that we do together. We've got construction business. We do some trucking in different parts of the world. We do some assisted living facilities in the UK and some property development. So we've got a few things on the boil. I also still do a bit of consultancy now and then as well. But my time primarily is spent running the personal development business stream with Dan.
That's so awesome. I love people that have their hand in all these different buckets, because I think, unfortunately, we live in a world where I'm going to talk from America based, and I'm sure it's the same in Western Europe too. Inflation is outpacing wages, and a lot of people have to work several jobs. Well, the one reason I was really excited to talk to you, and I think that it's something that I'm very passionate about, is I'm 44, so I still have time. I'm entrepreneurial. I'm not too concerned about myself, but I see these people like my neighbor here in, I moved from Chicago to Northeast Indiana. So I'm about an hour south of Chicago, and I have 2 buddies on the street. One is a ER doctor. He's in his early 50s, and he's tired. He's been working night shifts for 20 years. He's a very hardworking guy. He's a doctor, but when he was doing all his financial planning, he wasn't planning for this crazy inflation, and he doesn't have side hustles. He has one business, one skill set. So now he's faced with, well, shit, I'm going to have to work longer than I thought. I can't retire. And he's still relatively young, he's in his 50s. What happens if you just retired 2 years ago at 65, you're exhausted with life, and you have a very tight budget and pension, and then suddenly you have this double-digit inflation, you're getting crushed. So I think it's just so important you're lucky in the sense that, you work very hard to create that luck. But I'm saying you have that.
Yeah, of course.
You're young and you have that entrepreneurial mindset, but so many people, like the name of your book is Money Game. And I think it is, I love that title, because I think it is a game. You have to, life's a game too, in some ways. You have to kind of play the game of life. And, you don't want to spend your whole life being so serious and just trying to survive. And then at the end of your life, be like, man, I wish I had more fun. But at the same time, I'm a passionate believer of, to maximize life and have the incredible opportunities that you're living, you're proof of it. Money helps. Money, especially with kids, money buys back your time with childcare. Money enables you to get the best medicine. Money enables you to live in a nice area where your child's going to have a nice upbringing. Like all these different things. Money doesn't give you happiness, but it makes it a lot easier to get happiness.
Yeah, agreed. And I think this is one of the things that unfortunately has led to a lot of people not having any money, because they've fallen into the traps of some of these adages, which have kind of been a little bit twisted. Like, money's all evil. No, the love of money is the root of all evil. But the love of anything to any excess is going to be the root of some evil or other, right? The bottom line is that we live in a reality where the easiest medium of exchange is money. And money in and of itself doesn't have an opinion. It doesn't have an individualized energy or intention or direction. It goes with the flow of whoever's holding it and directing it. You put $1 million in the hand of Mother Teresa, some good's going to be done. You put it in the hands of someone that wants to build a cocaine plant in the backwaters of Colombia, you're going to get another situation, right? But ultimately, the money is just a medium for people to express that choice. And I think one of the paradigms that really has to shift, and when we do work, we're just going to be starting doing some more group work again around this, and I'm actually going to be delivering it myself and not the coaches. We're calling it Abundance Decoded. And one of the initial things that we're doing at the beginning of this journey that we're going to be going on with people is starting to unpack some of these paradigms and give them space to create new ones. Because the chap that you told me about that's on your street, that's the ER doctor, he's not even in that bad a situation. And I've seen this so many times. People, because they have only got the perspective of, I've had this job, I've been saving in my 401k, oh my God, the inflation is grinding it down, the stock market is not doing what it's supposed to do. When there is like a wealth of opportunities, and not even necessarily exotic ones either. even shifting over to something as simple as the syndicated multifamily houses, right? Which it's straightforward, as long as you're an accredited investor. There are plenty of people that are doing really, really good deals. It's real estate, so it's not something crazy and out of the box. And yet it's the kind of thing that can start to return double-digit returns on your money with a hard asset that will always outpace financial downturns and so on and so forth. And so I think one of the things I really want to encourage whoever's listening to this right now to do is don't start getting freaked out as the stuff's going on. People are the stock market. There is so much opportunity out there, but it's only if we take a step back and make ourselves available to start exploring those opportunities, getting the right support, getting the right direction, that you can make your way through this game that we call the money game and succeed at it.
Yeah. So I guess even before you start the practicalities, you got to work on your mindset. Is that kind of the abundance mindset?
100%. And I would say even before the mindset, start having an environment that's going to support a new mindset. Because one of the things that we have to bear in mind is that I think it's tens of thousands of thoughts a day. I bet it's like 60 or 70,000 thoughts or something like that we have every day. And most of them are just repeated thoughts of what's happened the day before. And the reason why that ends up being supported is for most of us, we're in the same place. We're around the same people. We drive the same way to work, or at least going to the same workplace. We have the same house, blah, blah, blah. We have the same routine. And so from a neuroscience perspective, we're kind of supporting just playing out that autopilot going on all of the time. So someone who says, you know what, let's say, for example, it's you, Lawrence, you're like, boom, I'm going to get a new abundance mindset. I'm ready to go. I'm reading some books. I'm listening to a podcast and blah, blah, blah. But you might read one book, right? But one book isn't going to undo 10, 15 years of imprinting neural pathways that say that something works a certain way. Or let's say, for example, someone says, I'm going to listen to one podcast a week. Okay, you're going to listen to one positive podcast every week. That's not going to overwrite the rest. Let's say it's a 2-hour podcast, right? You're spending 40 hours a week with your work colleagues and other God knows how many with whoever else who are still reinforcing the old way of thinking and our way of doing things. And so that 1 hour or 2 hours of podcast isn't going to undo that. There needs to be a consistency, or at least a curation to some extent of the environment that you're in to start supporting it. Doesn't mean that you have to leave your job and leave your husband or leave your wife and sorry, kids, you're on your own now. I'm off to go be abundant. I'm not saying that, but we can start to minimize the disempowering triggers happening in our environment, at least be aware of what's going on. If you're in a situation you can't get out of, at least be aware of it so that you can not be unconsciously triggered by it. Then once that environment sets up, your emotional state is going to support building new belief systems and a new abundance mindset easily. And then it's going to be a hell of a lot easier to execute on new financially abundant, mentally abundant, emotionally abundant, and lovingly abundant actions after that.
I love that. That phrase, you're the average of the 5 people you spend most time with.
100%.
It's so true. It's like, luckily I have a good marriage with my wife, but I've been in bad relationships before and just, it brings you down. And it's the same with when you're around those negative friends, or even if they're not negative, but even if they're just overspending. One thing I've noticed, Dan, and maybe it's a bit more in America than it is in England, but a lot of people, there are 2 things when they're younger. One is, they live above their means in the sense that they spend their whole weekly paycheck on Saturday night getting a table at the club and spending all this money on bottles and renting a fancy car they can't afford and kind of living above their means and spending everything they have. Or the other thing I've noticed is as people's wealth naturally goes up in their career, so as they get older and they get promotions and the income goes up, their spending kind of goes up with it, and they're just on that treadmill. They're not getting anywhere. Yeah. And one thing I love about your bio, Dan, is you talk, because you and I, we're kindred spirits in so many ways. We're both from England. We both have a 2.5-year-old son. We both love to travel. We both love money. But we also both have amassed great wealth and lost it. And so I want to talk to you about that. But I'll tell you my story before I go to yours.
Sure.
So when I was in my 20s, I made a lot of money trading. And the reason I made a lot of money is because I worked for a trading company. I got my first bonus, which wasn't much. I used it as a down payment on a 1-bedroom condo downtown Chicago. It was like, for a 23-year-old, everything you could dream of. Nice view, modern. 100%. And then I stayed there for 10 plus years. So as I didn't have a car at the time. I just got cabs everywhere. As my income went up, it just all went in my trading account. And then one day I turned 30 and I was like, whoa, I'm a multimillionaire. But my lifestyle hadn't changed because I was all focused on other goals. Like I was boxing in the Chicago Golden Gloves, and I was focusing on goals that didn't really take money, but they took a lot of energy and time. So I was all about working and boxing. And then I took a 5-year sabbatical and I was very foolish and blew through all my money enjoying life and traveling and having a great time, thinking in my head, I'm going to go back to the trading floor and keep making all this great money. I didn't realize those 5 years I was away, high frequency trading came in, the whole business model went. And basically the only smart thing I did during those 5 years financially is I bought a multi-unit building. And then when I realized like, well, shit, what am I going to do? I've had fun. I've followed my goals and passions. I'm 35. I've got to be responsible. Then I was like, well, luckily I had a friend at the time talking about being around good people. He was an attorney and he did real estate on the side. He's like, I hate having this dealing with legal clients. It's really boring. It doesn't ignite my passion at all. We should start investing in property. You should get your real estate license. We'll work together. I'm going to set up my own company. And so we still work together to this day. He's one of my best friends, best man at my wedding. I'm marrying him in a few months. I'm his, pastor or whatever they call it. So I'm so lucky that I had that one influence in my life. Who knows where I'd be now, but that was a very humbling thing because I had to restart. So I'm always so passionate. Can we talk about you creating a lucid world? And I'd love to know the lessons you learned, because I'll say one thing, Dan, that I learned from it was it really sucks because I think it's not easy to make money. I think it's I read somewhere that it takes twice as long to make half as much as you originally envisaged, and I think there's some truth to that. Sometimes you get lucky, but the one thing that I learned, and I'm sure you have the same mentality, is you have confidence in yourself. If you've done it once, you can do it again, and that's beautiful. That confidence,
100%. And I think that confidence, and I'll quick tangent and do that. So one of the things that I always talk about is I've got this framework called the Bob and Andy framework, and I'm not going to go into it in full. But ultimately, every time we go to do something or we say we want to do something, the mind checks the memory banks, it checks the archives to see, is there any evidence to support that this is possible? So when you've created before, when that conversation goes on in your mind, they're like, yeah, Lawrence has done it before. Like he killed it before doing something else, but at least the negativity, it might feel hard, but it doesn't feel impossible, right?
Yes.
Or it might feel that it'd be challenging, but it's not, I can't do it. And so many people are going off, and this is why, again, I said about the environment. So many people are, I'm going to go and do this thing, but you've literally got no life experience to support it. You've got no evidence. The people you're around aren't talking about it. You're not doing it. And that's why gathering that evidence in your life is so important. And remembering, if you have had some success, even if it's not in the same field, you can use the momentum of that success to build on to go and create something. It's very, very important to remember that the mind doesn't lose, and it's always going to look to the evidence it's got parked up. But you can bolster that evidence. You can bring more of it to the surface, but definitely pay attention to that, I would say.
I love that. So can we go back to young Dan?
Yeah, sure.
I'd love to hear this. This is awesome. So
I was quite a precocious kid. Put in context, I taught myself to make computers when I was 13 years old. And you probably remember the Loot newspaper.
Yes.
Yeah. So for those who are listening that aren't, pushing late 30s, early 40s and on, that don't remember about the Loot newspaper, in the UK, the Loot was a newspaper where you could put a free advertisement for anything. I think they sold it for about £1, but you could advertise in that paper for free. And people would pay the £1 because there's all these things that you could go in. And so what I did was I put the specs of a computer in the Loot. People would call me, they'd place the order and run and get the bits, make the computer and ship it to them. And then I found a company called Novatech Computers based out of Southampton that sold unbranded computers and did effectively drop shipping. So they would send an invoice to me and send the product to someone else. So I could get the money, pay them, ship the computer, and I put a couple $100 on that. But we're talking, I was 13, 14 years old. I remember the biggest deal.
Incredible.
I was 14 years old. I made £5,000 selling 5 laptops to a company, like living the best life.
That's crazy at that age.
I didn't really have friends. I found out when I was 27 that I was late diagnosed with Asperger's. So I didn't really have any friends. So I wasn't off playing with my mates. I was literally sitting down reading books like Think and Grow Rich as a teenager and Psycho-Cybernetics. And so I had a very, very strong mindset. But, and this is one of the lessons I learned, I didn't have any practical experience because I was young. I didn't know about life. And also I didn't have the emotional experience to be able to hold wealth. So when I went off and I think I was 19 or 20 when I made my first £1 million, I basically set up my own conglomerate. Yeah. But I had no experience, number one, and I had the arrogance of youth. And so I didn't have the right licenses for my business. and inadvertently had basically set up a company that the government could come and shut down. They just came and shut everything down because they didn't have the licenses for everything. So anyway, lost everything that time, thought I was really smart, went off because I hadn't learned my lesson yet, because I was still like Johnny Big Bollocks that knows everything, right? And went off and tried to put things in other people's names. Like, can you put that company in your name? And can you have that bank account in your name? Because like, yeah, they're not going to get me this time, you know? And then like made some more money over the next couple of years, made I think about £2-3 million over the next couple of years. And it all got nicked. It all got stolen. And so when I hit that second time, bro, it was really funny because, well, it's funny now in gallows humor, because so much of my identity and built on the guy that cracked the code. Like, yeah, I was really Think and Grow Rich. Like I knew it. Like, I knew everything. Nobody could tell me anything. And, you know, when you're staring in the face of it, going that horribly wrong a second time, it's like, well, maybe I don't know everything. But so much of my identity had been tied up in that I literally looked in the mirror and was like, I've got nothing left here. Like, I literally I'm no use to anybody. And unfortunately ended up in a very dark place of suicidal ideation. Thankfully, and I believe it was because of the way my brain is wired, because of the Asperger's, I didn't make an attempt, because as I sat and had to map everything out, because I don't have the capacity to be reactive and responsive, I have to plan everything because of the way my brain works. I looked at it and I didn't have a solid option. And because I didn't have a solid option, I paused and said, well, I need to like work on myself so that I'm not this loser that I thought I was that's going to fail at his suicide. And ended up on a journey of personal development, like redoing personal development, but not really understanding that that was actually going to save my life, which it ended up doing. Set up another consulting business, built that from scratch, got back to a really good place, and then ended up leaving that in 2018 to come and sharing my life, my experience, and the lessons that I learned from it with people around the world. And that's what we're doing today.
Damn, that's incredible. That to be that entrepreneurial and successful when you're young, twice, to make all that money, that's really incredible. Wow. That depression, I know exactly what you mean. I remember being at my lowest point, and I was single, broke up with my ex-girlfriend. So I had 2 dogs. I took them for a late walk in this part of the city of Chicago. It was very quiet. It was like 2 a.m. And I was just thinking, and I wasn't thinking I didn't want to commit suicide, but I remember understanding why people do. I just felt so down. And I remember, and I think the mark of depression is you can't rationally see a better time ahead. I just couldn't. I remember thinking rationally, yes, you can get yourself out of this, but emotionally, I just couldn't see a time where I had the previous happiness that I used to have. And for me, it wasn't because I wanted zeros in my bank account. I always related money to freedom. That I don't have to, when I was young, I worked for some terrible bosses, Dan. So it's like, when you reach that phrase, fuck you money, I think is so good, because it's basically saying you can say fuck you to any despotic, cruel, vindictive boss, right? You never have to be under the thumb of some awful boss that I had so many in my youth. And I was so depressed with that idea of, oh God, do I have to go back to this? But I love the way you pulled yourself out of it, because you didn't take a shortcut. Like you said, you went back through, it was like you had that personal development where you worked on yourself. And I think that's the best advice for anyone. And actually, I had a friend, shout out to Brad if he's listening to this, who kind of did the same thing when I went through a really bad breakup once. He said, Lawrence, I know you feel bad right now, but if you look at your day-to-day life, everything you're doing, it's just a matter of time. It's like you're still going to the gym, you're still working out, you're still being around good people, positive friends, you're still working hard in your career, you're doing all the right things. So you're making time your ally, you're going to get out of it. But I think the problem with people that are depressed is if you just stay at home, you're not around any people, you don't do any exercise, you're eating shitty food, watching 14 hours of Netflix every day, well, then it's going to be much harder to get out of it because your daily habits are not good. So I love that. Dan, sorry to bring you back to a bad time, but can you just talk a little, I'm good. A little bit about maybe some of the books you read or some of the people you talked to, just to get yourself out of that, because I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah, the thing I really want people to so I actually did a TED talk about this, but they refused to publish it because I titled it "What Suicide Taught Me About Life." So because of the title, they refused to publish it. But it's okay. I'm going to make a documentary around the same concept anyway. So we're going to get the message out all the same.
That's awesome.
But one of the things that I need people to understand, there wasn't a moment when I was like, oh, I'm not depressed anymore in my life. It's fine. And I also want people to understand I wasn't going into personal development to make my life better. I literally wanted to delusion myself so that I wouldn't fail at my suicide attempt. That was where I was. So my intention wasn't to improve, but you cannot populate your mental environment with a certain caliber of input over a consistent time and not have change. It's like people that say that complain about not being in shape, right? So like, I've got a little bit of the dad bod going on over COVID and all the things. And I could sit there and complain, oh, blah, blah. No, I didn't. What I did was made sure, okay, let's see what I'm eating. Right, what am I eating? Am I burning more calories than I'm taking in? No. Okay, then we need to take care of that. Am I hitting the gym consistently? Am I getting my steps in? Am I drinking water? Am I getting sleep? I shifted those and I've dropped pounds and pounds and pounds. I'm continuing to get back in shape. If you do that consistently, you're always going to get back in shape. There is no one that follows the formula of consistent movement in a direction and not get an aligned destination. And with me, I was literally, because I was so obsessed with understanding what had I gotten wrong, because obviously something was right, because I've been able to do some crazy things, right? Like I was just, my parents, I didn't come from a special background. I'm not stupid, but I'm not the most intelligent. I don't got like a limitless brain going on. I can do some things, but there are people fabulously more intelligent than me. And so I knew there was something to it, but it had all gone to pants. And I needed to understand why it had gone to pants, because I knew something was there, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And so for that time, I was reading books, listening to tapes. I learned to transliterate Hebrew and Arabic so I can go back into ancient texts and study those. I was looking at the biographies of people who had done great things. Literally all I was doing, that was all I was doing for like a couple of years. And so this was all like 2008. It wasn't until 2015 I woke up. I managed to get myself a nice little place in Highgate. For those of us who know where Highgate is in North London, it's a nice little part of London. I was going to New York and I was going to Dubai like 4 or 5 times a year, like flying business first, whatever the thing was, having fun with my friend, had a tailor, a couple of nice kettles, watch timepieces for those who don't know what a kettle is. And I'd just come back from a trip with my cousin to Thailand. We'd gone to Asia, Thailand and Singapore. And I'd been away for 2 weeks. And during that time, I took one phone call. And yet for 10 minutes, my team ran everything and my business has still continued to be successful. And I realized, I laid in and was like, oh my God, I actually like my life. And I couldn't remember the last time that I'd been down and depressed. And so the point I really want to drive here is when your environment, your internal and external environment, in terms of what you're pumping into your brain and what you're keeping around you, matches your goals, it doesn't matter what you're trying to do, you're always going to end up there, right? For me, I wasn't trying to improve my life, but because the caliber of what was going on around me matched elevation, I elevated all the way out of suicidal depression. Do I not get depressed ever? Of course, I still get the whisper of depression from time to time, but I have grown into a person that recognizes that, gives myself grace. Oh, I'm not feeling too great today. Maybe I'm going to take some personal time. Oh, maybe I need to go and do a workout in and get some endorphins going. Maybe I need to speak to someone. It's been a lot better since I've had the kid because, a little human will always bring you up with the energy, right? But ultimately, if you commit today that I am going to ruthlessly curate my internal and external environment to match a goal, whether it's a happier relationship, better health, more money, and stick to it, you have to want it more than the excuses. You have to want it more than than all the nonsense. That's why I call it following the sexy. It has to feel sexy to you, because anything that doesn't feel sexy, right, you're not going to have the energy to go through those downtimes, the obstacles, the challenges. We're entrepreneurs. We understand that that's always going to be a part of it, right? If you do that, you will win. It's physically impossible that you can't win if you're matching internal and external, being consistent. It will happen. It's just a matter of time.
That's such good advice. Couldn't agree more. Dan, when you eat, the first thought that comes to my mind when you're this young, wealthy guy traveling, you got all this extra wealth. How did you, like you mentioned your cousin, how did people, whether it's family or friends, or how do they keep up with you? Like, how could you travel with the bud? Like, you're so much more wealthy than the must have been than everyone around you. Was that very surreal, or how did that work?
Not everyone around me, because again, like you're not, and I know this is going to sound a bit harsh, but that's the reality of it. You're not going to be able to get to a level of wealth if you haven't got wealthy people around you. Gotcha. Like if you are the only person around you that's getting it in, it's not going to happen, right? And even if it does, it's not going to last very long, because the conversations that you're going to be having with those people it's not going to keep you where you need to be. You're not going to be able to brainstorm $1 million challenges with someone who has never made more than 20,000. I'm not just respecting people that are making that wage, but I'm saying you're not going to be able to do that. And if you can't brainstorm and keep yourself elevated to that level, you're not going to be able to maintain it. And so for me, I think it was Ty Lopez I first heard say this, but I've heard it other places before. Like, you keep a portion of your time with people around you that are aiming to get ahead. So, for example, like, I've got a little group of mates. We're all shooting to get past the 10 million mark. That's what we're doing. So we're all like pushing each other. We're like, we're motivating each other. We're holding each other accountable. We're going to do a week in Prague next month, for example. And we do this, we call it a working week. We did it last year here in Florence. We're doing it again in Prague, where we make sure we meditate, we make sure we work out. We set, what we're going to do for the next hour. How's it going to move you forward? We brainstorm what we do that. And then we go and have fun in the evening. So we end the week with a spa. So we do that. And so then I actually spend more of my time with people that are more successful than me. So I'm blessed to be in a lot of really good masterminds. And I enjoy being the dumbest, least accomplished, brokest person in the room. And I do my best to spend as much time in those rooms as possible. So I would probably say I spend about 50% of my time being the dumb person and learning. I probably spend about then 30% of the time with people like at my level that we're looking to get forward. And then I spend a little bit of time with people that I get to pour into. Now, because of the work that I do, it looks like I spend more time because I've got 2 podcasts, I write for magazines, I put out content. So I replicate myself, but in terms of my physical time spent, I probably only spend about 20% of the time. So what that actually means is, like, the trip with if I'm going on a trip with people and not everybody's on the same level, like, it's probably going to be 4 of us that are on the level and maybe 1 or 2 that aren't. We'll sponsor and top up for the other person. Like, we're going to Mykonos in September, me and some of the guys. Not everyone's on the same level. We will want to say, we want to stay at a certain level of accommodation. We want to fly a certain way. Right, you guys, this is what it would cost for you normally. We're going to pay the difference. And we just basically, we bring our guys along with us. They're not sponges. The good people, they're going to bring a good vibe. The good people to be around, they're not bringing us down. And we get to pour into them. But that's kind of the way that we do it. So I spend most of my time with people ahead, a good chunk of time with people that we're working together to get ahead. And then I pour into people as well.
That's such good advice. I'm going to use a jiu-jitsu analogy because a lot of people listen to this, do jiu-jitsu.
You roll.
Teach jiu-jitsu. And
you teach. I'm a white belt. I'm a white belt.
Oh, that's awesome.
No, yeah. I'm a newbie.
Dan, listen, I'll say this. Jiu-jitsu is so, when I was young, I was a boxer and I had a dream about fighting MMA and I hated grappling. And I did it just because I knew I had to do it to compete in the sport. And now my last fight was 9 years ago. The problem with boxing is head trauma. And the beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu is I'll go to the gym and there'll be, a 55-year-old lawyer on the mats. It's like, it's a sport that's open to anybody, there'll be 110 pound female. Dan, one of the best sights I ever saw was one of my students. She's a brown belt now. She's a beast. But back then, I think she was a blue belt. She used to be a strongwoman. She'd do all this strongman training. She does yoga. She's an incredible athlete. And I remember I was rolling with somebody. I looked to my left. She's choked out one of the black belt instructors, unconscious. He's on the mats, completely out. She's lifting his legs, kind of shaking his legs, trying to wake him up. And I look across, and we catch our eyes for a second and kind of give her a nod. I'm like, so proud of her. And listen, I'm 190 pounds, a black belt. She's nearly caught me before. I got out by the skin of my teeth. She's a beast, So it's so cool. But Dan, the analogy you said is so powerful because you said you're around, you're kind of your peers with the same kind of income and goals. You're around people that are ahead of you, and then you're mentoring the people behind you. And that analogy is so powerful. And I think you should use that for every aspect of your life. I think you could use it for relationships. Like, I'm a happily married man, but I also want to talk to people that have been married for 50 years and I want to get wisdom from them. But I also want to help my single friends who are trying to get a good relationship. Same with what you said about money is so perfect. And it's the same with, we use the jiu-jitsu analogy. You have to roll with all 3 types of people. The people that are better than you, that you can work on your defense and you can learn from. The people that are similar to you, so you can kind of work on your competitive skills where it's an equal match. And then the people you're better than, so you can help them and you can also practice some of your offense and things like that. And are you familiar with GSP, the former UFC champion? Yeah. So what he said is, this is such good advice, is he used to train with all these absolute monsters and he was working a lot on defense, just surviving. But a couple of weeks before his fights, he would go to these jiu-jitsu schools where he would just roll with a bunch of blue belts and he would just smash them. So he's practicing his offense. And he had that same approach where, depending on where he was in his fight training, he was rolling a different way so he could peak at the right time. And so that advice you gave is just, it applies to so many things. It's incredible.
Yeah. Love it. I'm going to actually start thinking about it in more context as well. Actually, I'm doing with everything.
So Dubai is this because one of the leaders, I'm not sure who it is, in United Arab Emirates is a huge jiu-jitsu fanatic. And so the most prestigious jiu-jitsu tournament is called the ADCC after him. And so he's incentivized so many black belts and instructors to come and teach.
It's the Abu Dhabi. I was saying it's the Abu Dhabi ruler.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So there's so much good jiu-jitsu there. It's like a hotspot. So that's going to be a good place for you to keep your journey going.
100%. Yeah, I've been working with there's a champion. He's a Brazilian guy. He's like won a load of MMA stuff. And I've been working one-on-one with him to get back into it. So I've got about a year and a half of experience, but with dots. With dots. So obviously I didn't roll it all during COVID. So I started before COVID, didn't roll it all during COVID, then few spots after COVID. But when I got set in here, I'm like, no, I need to knuckle down and get into it. So I'll make sure I do that. And I want to do a bit of time there, and then I'm going to start going to classes, I think probably September. And I'm going to do like 2-3 classes a week minimum and just go after it and then do some rolling and still work with my one-on-one coach as well.
That's so cool. I think the biggest thing that I didn't appreciate before, back when I was more of a competitor, I was just thinking about performance. Like, I want to get good so I can smash this guy. And now I'm a bit older and hopefully wiser. Yeah. I realize that it's my mental break from all the, all the stress and nonsense of my regular life. And you go in there and just, put your phone to the side, and it's just you time, and you're around good energy, good people. And just even talking to you, Dan, you have such good energy. And I think the older I get, the more I want to be around people like you. That way, we're going to finish this conversation. I'm going to be inspired. I'm going to go and work out. I'm going to work hard. It gives you inspiration. I feel like I get that from training when I go and I'm just around good energy, good people. I always leave in a better place. And there's so many times I'll drag myself there. I didn't sleep good. I'm tired. I'm sore. And I'm just like, I'll just go and just do technique, maybe one roll. And then, you train hard for an hour and a half. And then suddenly you're like, I feel much better now. So kind of what you said earlier about when you're not in a good place, you just got to keep moving, keep doing things, keep moving forward. And so for me, that's what jiu-jitsu is about. But that's awesome that you're on the same journey.
100%. Can I ask you a question? Because one of the things I really want to make sure that Ethan does is that I want to make sure he does a martial art. And I think jiu-jitsu is just a great one because it teaches just great. It's just such a gentlemanly sport. It's very, very mixed and so on. Are you going to get your little human into jiu-jitsu? And if so, what age are you going to do that?
Such a great question. Shout out to my other neighbor. So I have two friends here before I moved on the same street. And I wouldn't have had the confidence to move. Like, I'm a city boy. I've always been in cities. I was in downtown Chicago for 21 years. I'm on a 8-acre lot in a house in the rural Indiana countryside. And one of the reasons is I have a really good, the doctor friend he was at my wedding. He's a really good long-term friend of mine. The other guy, Braulio, is a jiu-jitsu instructor, and I wasn't very close to him. I didn't know him very well, but I knew of him, and I always liked him. I competed against some of his students coming up, and I knew he's literally 2 houses down, and I knew that he has 2 boys. One is 6, one is I think just turned 14. They both compete. The 14-year-old is already like a child champion. He goes to all the top tournaments. He's always winning, and I thought, what a place to raise my son. He's going to have. Instead of being downtown Chicago in a city, he's going to have a yard to play in, and he's going to have a neighbor with 2 champion boys to look up to. And so I'm thinking jiu-jitsu around 4 years old. They have a really good kids program there. He's got good kids to train with. But I really think for kids, I think the most important thing is the instructor. So for instance, there was, if I lived in the north side, I'm south of Chicago. On the north side of Chicago, there's a judo school, and they're like Olympian judo level. They're run by 2 brothers. The father was Olympian. One of the brothers, I think, was Olympian. The other one won the world championships. Wow. They have an amazing kids program. So it's not that I prefer judo or jiu-jitsu. It's if I lived in that area, I would take my son there because that school is they have such a good program. So I think that's the thing is, amazing. But for kids, it's not even about, and I used to see the kids classes. It's not even when they're really young, if you start them around 4, it's not even jiu-jitsu. It's more just learning like how to line up and listen, how to fall, how to move. It's almost like gymnastics, almost where they're just moving and then over time you're slowly increasing more and more. But my son is very he's kind of in his own world, Dan. It's a little scary. He's such a sweet boy, but he's definitely like he'll sit sometimes and I'll forget he's even there because he's just he'll like be playing with blocks and he's trying to figure. He's got that engineering mindset. and he'll just be doing it for an hour. And I'm just like, oh, gee, you know, my son's right there. I've been focusing on something else. We're parallel playing. So I'm a little nervous about him being able to take direction, but I'm thinking around my neighbor said 4 years old. But I think but like, for instance, if there was an amazing Taekwondo school with a really great kids program and a great instructor who I really liked his energy, that would be a great one for kids too. I think the balance for us, and this is such a tricky one, is we want to encourage our kids, our boys, without, we don't want them to peak at 14 and burn out at 16. Yeah. You know, that's one thing. My father was the other way. He had a very overbearing father. So with my brother and I, he was just like, I want my kids to be happy. I want to give them love, but he never really pushed me to do sports. And looking back, I was like, I used to run track in high school, and I used to swim competitively. And I was like, I wish my dad had been like, okay, son, let's go to the track. Let's work some repeats. Let's push ourselves. But it was always just like, hey, you know, do your own thing. Like he didn't want to put pressure on us. But then if you go to jiu-jitsu tournaments, you see the other way around, where you see the obese parents that have never done anything screaming and abusing their kids because their kid didn't win, because they're trying to live vicariously through their kids. And I hate seeing that. So like, I feel like there's that fine balance. But I'll say this, Dan. If we teach our boys to get really good at a martial art, I think it's a cheat code for life. And I realized that everything that I got in my life that I'm proud of, I feel like was some way, in some weird way, linked back to martial arts. And this is something, as a man, you'll appreciate this. When I was a teenager, I was very shy around women. And then when I was in my early 20s, I was still a little better, but I was still a little bit shy. And I realized that I did very well with women because of this weird thing. Like, I remember when I was teaching English in Moscow, in Russia, and I came to this party. There was a girl there I liked, but I was kind of shy, and she was kind of standoffish. And I came to this party where she was at, and I just before that gone to a boxing gym in Russia, and I was sparring with some real stud Russian guy, and my nose was a bit swollen. So like the guys are talking to me, and they're like, oh, you know, I think I had a little mark on my eye, and they're like, oh, where have you come from? And I was like, I came from this gym, and they're like, dude, that's a really famous gym. Like, I can't believe you just walked in and you were trained there. I was like, yeah. And then suddenly all the guys started giving me respect because they found that out. And then the girl, I don't know whether she sensed it or she was seeing it. She suddenly comes over, and they're like, oh, like, what are they talking about? And so I think that aside from the confidence that it gives you as a person, martial arts gives you the respect of your peers. And that goes such a long way for a young person. 100%. So I'm sorry, a little tangent, but I think that's the best thing we can do for our boys, is to give them that cheat card.
Agreed. And another thing for any dads that are listening, Matthew Syed's book Bounce, he shares a story about I think it was a chess master that wanted to prove that his chess mastery wasn't accidental. It was, you know, it's a skill that he developed. And so he wanted all of his kids, to master level. And so what he did when they were small is he gave them like chess pieces and allowed them to play with it. And then as they got older, he gradually, just like with the jiu-jitsu, gave them more and more and more until when they got to 4 or 5 years old, started to teach them actual chess. And every single one of his kids became chess masters. So what I've done with Ethan is I've given him different toy-based things, like different toy instruments, to see which one he resonates with, and then kind of encouraged and played with him on the toys. I've done the same with the chess pieces. I've done the same with kicking the ball around, so that he's got play-based attraction to these various skills, so that when he is doing them and he can have a rounded life, you know, pick a couple of hobbies that he wants to do that gives him, you know, something mental, something for emotional intelligence, something for social skills, it's going to be fun. And that's something that definitely, I think, you know, from the research I've done, is going to be hopefully at least set him up with some options for what he's going to do going forward without being overbearing about it.
Yes, exactly. But I really like what we were talking about before, about when you've had success financially and then you lose it all, you have the confidence you can do it again. I think it's the same. It's the same with, like, we use that example of chess. If you teach, if a young person learns mastery at chess, they know they can associate the hours in and the time they put in to learn something. So they have that growth mindset, and then they have confidence that, oh, if I want to take up boxing when I'm 16, they have the mentality. They know what it takes. Oh, it's going to take me finding a gym. It's going to take hard work. It's going to take discipline, consistency, and they have that mindset. So I think it's such a good skill to give kids is that 100%. Same mentality.
100%. Yeah.
Dan, we are such good kindred spirits. I'm so glad we connected. So with money, how do you think now you're a bit older and wiser? how do you think money has improved your life? And how do you think like people should look at money in the sense of, a lot of people now, money is just a lot of times just digital, right? It's just zeros in a checking account or in a savings account, or it's an asset you own that you might not even see. But how do you think, in a practical terms, people should look at money and how it can make your life better?
Well, first and foremost, for me personally, I'm the same as you. It's about freedom, right? Numbers on the screen can be your cage, or it can be the key, right? And I think when you're not giving it this special magical, money, because it is just numbers on a screen. I mean, when you look at it now, like with the US dollar, for example, someone actually goes on a computer, presses a button, numbers show up on a screen. They then send those numbers to the Federal Reserve in the form of treasury notes, and then they owe them money back. And then that goes into the banks, and then the banks give it to you, and then you use your card. Now everything's cashless nowadays. And then that number goes over there, and then you go to work and they give you some numbers on the screen. And then, you buy something and blah, blah, blah. And these numbers are just moving around. And it's literally just numbers on the screen. It's not like back in the day when someone had to go and dig out some gold or whatever. Anyone who wants to look at the history of money, read the book, The Bitcoin Standard. I don't remember the name of the author. But the Bitcoin Standard really puts into perspective just how far away we've come from money being money. Like fiat currency is basically a big scam. It's a big hot potato scam. But these numbers move around, and it's like sort of like a weird Ponzi scheme. But the money just moves here and moves there. They lend it to you here. You take that loan. You go and buy a car. They put it in a bank over there. That bank then lends out 10 times. It's just this big hot potato thing. And the second that you see it for that, and that's why I call it a game. The second that you see, it's just a big game of numbers moving around. And at the energetic perspective, so long as I'm giving a home for some of those numbers to move to me, then those numbers can give me freedom to live life on my own terms. And if I just think about these numbers are just, codes, combination codes for me to live life on my own terms versus, money, this thing, I don't have enough of it, blah, 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 blah. Like making money is straightforward. It's not easy because we have to overcome ourselves. We have to overcome challenges, tribulations, blah, blah, blah. But it's really straightforward. People exchange money for problems being solved and for pain being alleviated. It's like when I'm working with people and I'm asking them to start looking at charging more money or to change their pricing structure. And I always ask them, people always overestimate, for example, $1 million. So to put this into context, I laugh when people start saying, I'm going to help you make six figures in your business. So you're going to help me make $2,000 a week. There are billions of people in the world, and you're going to help me make $2,000 a week. And I'm supposed to be excited about $2,000 a week. When you put it into the context of $1 million, that's still only $83,333 a month, 20 grand a week. Now, depending on what you're serving and the problem that you're solving, you can do that by helping one person a week. There are billions of people in the world, and you can do that by helping one person a week. And this is the crazy thing. Within reason, no matter what price point you're going to set for your goods and services, you've probably exchanged a number higher than that with someone for a good or service before. If you're an adult, you probably bought a house. You've probably given someone 6 figures, maybe even 7 figures. Maybe it didn't all come from you. Maybe some of it came from the bank or whatever, but you've exchanged it. If you bought a car, you've exchanged. You went and bought an education. So bring it down to reasonable space. Let's say someone is looking to make that $1 million. You can have a good or service at $1,000, $2,000. You can knock that out 10 or 20 times a week, and you've got $1 million a year. Oh, well, how am I going to? You've spent $1,000 having a problem solved. You spent $2,000 for a problem being solved for you, or someone pulling out of a place of pain. All you need to do is look at the billions of people in the world and find a problem that sufficient people have to be able to exchange $1,000 or $2,000 at a time for you. Or, in my opinion, find people who've got bigger problems, do less exchanges, and maybe even make more than $1 million solving their problem for you. And the crazy thing about money is, and this is where entrepreneurship becomes such a fun game, you don't even need to be the one necessarily exchanging the value or solving the pain. You could be the one bringing people together and make money. So when you realize that that's all it is, and that it's just going to be numbers on a screen that you can use to live life on your own terms, the game changes.
That's absolutely beautiful. Dan, Safadina Moose is the author, The Bitcoin Standard.
That's the one.
It's incredible. It's an incredible book because I don't really want to go down a Bitcoin rabbit hole, but I remember having a conversation with a friend and he's like, oh, Bitcoin's all a scam. And I said, well, I mean, isn't the whole fractional reserve system of money a scam? Well, and the way you described it was so good, but you're right. It all starts with someone just tapping a few more zeros in a screen, and that's the financial system we have. And I love the idea, the game analogy, because I remember in 2020 when COVID happened, it was so unsure. So the stock market had the initial reaction where it crashed, and then it just shot up, and everyone was pricing in all the stimulus that they're putting back in the economy. And so many people, one of my pet peeves is that the blue collar workers and the white collar workers. And the white collar workers were at home and they have their assets that are all inflating and they're working remotely anyway. It's easy for them. And they're like, oh, we should shut down all these businesses, work remotely and be responsible. And it's like, yeah, those same people, though, still expect the Uber Eats to bring them their food, and they still expect the farmers to go out and plant the crops to bring them their food. So the blue-collar workers don't really have that same luxury. And on top of that, they tend not to also have investments, like they don't have equities, so their portfolio is not going up. So it's that's the game of the wealthy. It's not that they're cheating. Like, I guess certain politicians are cheating, right? The insider trading is so common these days. Like they're almost admitting it. But the wealthy people, it's not that they're cheating, but they're just playing the game correctly because they have the rules that we don't have. And what you said, Dan, about this, you might not realize this because of where you're at in life, but I'm going to explain to you the way you just explained. The way you said this offhand comment, said, I'm not impressed by six figures. Think about it. You do the math. You said that's 2,000 a week. It's nothing. And that's so true. So many people, if you say six figures, they're like, oh, I can mentally get around that. But as soon as you say seven figures, that'll just blow their mind. They don't have the capacity to appreciate it. But then you broke down the math and you said, it's only whatever it is, 83,000 a month. And I love that. And the idea of this is why you're such a good entrepreneur, because you broke down the question. You said, if you can provide a solution to either you provide a solution to a problem or you save someone time, wealthy people will pay for those two things. So if you can find 100%. A niche that does that, so you just have that. I guess I just wanted to emphasize that because maybe you're just saying it without realizing that that's very unique and awesome. There's so many people who don't understand that, and the fact that you just that's like in your DNA. It's just like, well, of course, it's a big deal.
I mean, but to be honest, with the group program, that's one of the reasons. So I've been. Like I said, the business has been going really well. Primarily, my coaches have been doing a lot of the coaching. I still do the VIP days, like intense 1 day, 2 days, working with people at a high level. But in terms of like the day-to-day offerings, normally it's my coaches that deliver. That's one of the reasons I'm really excited about, starting to do. We'll probably do it a couple of times a year, this group program, because we're going literally. I've got this thing I call the triangle to abundance, where we look at scarcity, where you don't have the mental, emotional, and mental space to live life in your own terms, all the way up to abundance, where you can do so with excess. And just going through the steps and the shift in mindset, and not just mindset, but strategically what needs to shift in terms of how you're operating in order to move through those steps. Because I think so many people could do with access to these game-winning strategies. Because a lot of people are sitting down, resigning themselves to being a loser. And I don't mean that in a bad way as in you're a loser, but I mean losing the game of life, resigning themselves to not being ahead, resigning themselves to having to be challenged, resigning themselves to not being able to at least be stable. Maybe not live life completely on your terms. Maybe you're not going to St. Bart's every single year, but at least you're not stressing out about covering the bills, not stressing out, does my kid have a choice about whether he's going to go to college or not, or she's going to go to college or not, or I'd love for them to do this activity, but we can't spare it because we're eating spam and cheese for dinner. Like that's unnecessary. And there's like, even when you think about how many trillions of dollars that they printed over the course of COVID. Now those trillions of dollars don't go nowhere. Those numbers on the screen are somewhere. They've moved through the system. They're available. There's more money now than there's ever been. It's just about understanding the game of having those numbers show up in your account so that you can live life on your terms. And we all have ways that we can do that. It's just about understanding how.
So in terms of, I love all this stuff talking about the getting the mindset right, being around the right people, having the abundance mindset. I love all that. But in terms of just practicality, if someone's listening and they do okay, they do okay for themselves, but they want to just be more fiscally prudent, I guess. Do you have certain things like, do you think it's up to them to decide what they're comfy investing in terms of like risk and reward parameters? Like, for instance, for me personally, I love the idea of, I work in real estate, so it's a bit easier for me, but I love the idea of having a large amount of my savings and wealth in real estate that's stable, It's got good tax write-offs. It's got debt pay down. Over time, it's going to appreciate. And then I like to have a little portion in something like Bitcoin that I love. Philosophically, I love Bitcoin because for me, it's like it's a money outside the system where, things like Turkey is having, 100% inflation. All these countries, if you live in one of these countries, and we're lucky we don't, but if you live in a country with just crazy inflation, at least now you have an option. You can put your money, your wealth in Bitcoin, and it's outside the system of the country you live in. So I just love philosophically Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is also incredibly volatile, and holding it becomes a bit of a challenge. So for me personally, those two things work very well for me. And then, maybe a little tiny bit in some stocks and things. But do you have certain strategies that you work with people, like practical strategies, or is it too dependent on their parameters, like their risk parameters, things like that?
So I've actually got a framework that I teach called Money DNA. And what we do with Money DNA is we actually map where someone's unique flow is going to be. And so not everybody's going to have the natural skill, not that it can't be learned, but not everyone's going to have the natural skill set, for example, to work in real estate. It requires systemization, diligence with research. You need to be able to manage people and resources. Not everybody's naturally that way. They might be a people person. That might be where their skills base is. So when we map their Money DNA, we're looking at the kind of vehicles that are going to be more aligned with them, the kind of role that they're going to be great with, the kind of communication that they need to be able to have with themselves and others, the way that they execute decisions. And also the fifth pillar we look at in Money DNA is how they can ensure that they don't self-sabotage, they don't procrastinate, and they take action. Because you can have all the philosophical ideas in the world about what you're going to do, but if you're not acting on it, you're not going anywhere. And so what we do is we normally map their Money DNA and look at the kinds of things that are going to be in line with their Money DNA to get started. Because once you're started and you get to a certain level, then you can collaborate, then you can bring in team members, you can bring in people to do more of the legwork, and then you can start to develop skills to start moving outside of your primary income space to start looking at other things. It's like real estate. I'm not the best person to be doing real estate. I get too excited. I want to create things. So what do I do? What did I do? I learned basics, got some movement, partnered up. My brother's great with that. Give my brother Charles a system and he's just going to follow it, right? That's why he does that stuff. I'm not great with it. We're doing a business plan. We're applying to get $20 million to expand the assisted living business right now. Don't leave me getting that business plan sorted. But my brother is like, yep, we've done it. It's like, I've done the financials, boom, 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 boom. Whereas I'm like coming up with the ideas of how it's going to expand, what we're going to do with it, how we can increase the profitability, how we're going to look at the exit in 5 to 10 years, and blah, blah, blah. That's my skill. But once you understand where your natural flow is, you can pour into that, get momentum, because a lot of people don't get momentum, right? They try to do something that's outside of their natural skills. They don't have the discipline. They don't have the desire. They don't have the stick rate. They get stuck and they stop. They start to build that losing momentum and they don't move forward. If you go where the flow is, you can build that momentum and then you can start to build on that momentum to, okay, now I'm going to go and learn the skills of real estate. I'm going to take the money that I've made over here with stocks or with whatever and pour it into maybe building a team that can support me making money with real estate. Or I'm going to take my capital and become an investor in a syndication, right? And make money with real estate that way. But I think it's important to understand you first, follow the flow first, and then expand beyond the flow and add layers once you've got momentum going.
No, that's really great advice. And Dan, when you were talking, I just realized talking about solving problems, that's actually the bread and butter of what I do in real estate, because I work, I help friends get condos and houses, but the main aspect of my business is working with investment properties. So I match an investor from New York City with a builder in Chicago that's finishing a project. It's not even listed yet. The numbers work for both parties. We agree on something fair. And then I'll help them, because they don't live here, I'll help them with their inspector, with their attorney, with their lender, then when it's finished with their property manager. So I've just realized, talking about solving problems, that's what I'm doing. Problems. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I never thought about that. I thought I was just doing real estate, but I didn't understand that. That's one of the niches that I've got. Yeah.
Even a butcher and a baker, they're solving the problem of hunger and you not having an abattoir or not knowing how to bake bread.
Yes.
Right? That's what the butcher's doing. I want steak. I don't have the wherewithal to farm cows and to look after them and to, skin them and whatever, and blah, blah, blah. So I go to the butcher. The butcher may not even be the person who does that either. He may be the one that knows how to take an animal that's been through the abattoir that I can put into pieces and then I can market it to people, right? He's solving the problem of the abattoir owner. So we're all solving problems. A teacher is solving the problem of a parent not having the capacity, or the government in putting it on the parents that they have to go into institutions. So the teacher's solving the problem of the government needing to serve these parents that they've told have to go into a certain system, or if it's a private school or whatever, a tutor, boom, boom, boom. It's all problem solving all the way through.
That's so true. You mentioned earlier about the self-sabotage. Do you see that a lot? And can we talk 100%. A little bit about that?
Yeah, sure thing.
So what are I guess some of the most typical ways people self-sabotage, and how do we avoid it?
First of all, I want to just make sure everyone understands something that's my perspective. And I just finished. Well, I didn't just finish. We're doing the scoring and the last editing now on a documentary called Manifest Nation. And Manifest Nation, what we've done is we've scientifically interrogated the concept of manifestation. I've got a tenured neuroscientist, a medical biochemist, and one of the scientists, Dr. Keith, that worked on the MRI machine. And one of the things that's really great about getting to interview these people that literally focus on the brain and what it does, the chemistry of it, like the science of the brain, the wiring of the brain with Dr. JJ. And it's nobody actually technically self-sabotages. And I know that sounds really, really weird, but also nobody technically procrastinates because the mind is a terminator. It's always moving in a positive direction. It's just we sometimes have a disconnect consciously with what that moving direction is. So when we're procrastinating, what's happening is our conscious choice about where we want to go and the unconscious direction that our brain finds itself wired in going in are not the same. And so I'm saying, for example, I want to go and work out, right? I want to make sure that I'm getting into the gym a few times a week and I'm working out. And they get up and this and that. What's actually happening is my brain has a programming that says I'm going to stay the shape that I am, whether it's some kind of trauma around the gym, whether it's a mental self-image that doesn't include me being in shape, or some kind of fear that something's going to happen, all happening at the unconscious level, and I don't go to the gym. People say, I self-sabotaged, I procrastinated. No, your brain went in a different direction to your conscious choice. And so the way to get beyond procrastination and self-sabotage is to bring those two into harmony and alignment, and then you won't do that anymore.
That makes 100% makes sense. One thing that I haven't read it, but I always hear people talk about The Secret. And is it that I think the gist is you've got to kind of get it. It sounds kind of what you're saying, where you're getting your mind aligned with the place you want to go. But the criticism that I've heard people talk about it is that's all well and great, but it's the most important thing is doing the work. And I guess you need both though. And I guess having the mind aligned makes it easier for you to do the work consistently.
But this is what we're saying at the very beginning of this conversation, right? It's that, and what I saw from my own story, it's just thinking happy thoughts isn't going to send you anywhere, because all it takes is one trigger from your environment to remind you that, no, your bank account is, I'm happy, I'm wealthy, I'm wise. No, you hate your marriage and your marriage hates you. You've got no money in the bank and you're sick. You're sick in the body, right? You have to do something about these things. Now, if I'm saying I'm moving into health, I'm moving into wealth, I'm moving into a happier relationship, and then I'm taking actions to support that desire, then I'm moving in the right direction. I'm creating that internal and external alignment. Far too often what people do is they start to depend on this mythical thinking perspective of, I'm going to close my eyes and clap my hand, wear this crystal and smoke this ayahuasca, or whatever they do with the ayahuasca, and everything's going to be perfect. That's not how it works.
Right.
That's not how it works. And one thing I always say, and I get into trouble a lot with my peers in the personal development industry, especially the deeply woo-woo spiritual ones, because I call them out on their BS. It's all of these people that are saying that you don't have to do anything to create something, did something to sell you the story that you don't need to do anything to create something. I'm going to say that again. All of the people selling you the story that you don't need to do something to create something did something to sell you the story. They ran a Facebook ad. They wrote a book to tell you, here's the book that tells you don't need to do anything. You can clap your hands. Then why don't you just clap your hands? Why did you write the book, mate? Right? So let's just start looking at the reality of the situation. Everything that shows up in your life shows up because you've moved through time and space to affect a choice, or failed to move through time and space to affect a choice. I can't sit here visualizing or have a vision board about me having a black belt. I need to be on the mat, rolling, learning my skills, working on my fundamentals, doing drills, getting out, competing to move through the steps to getting to be a black belt. That's it. There's no way around it. And yet I think we're in this popcorn culture where people want it easy. They want instant gratification, and they've lost sight of the fact that the work is the only thing that's going to work. But the work must be supported with the mindset pushing towards the work, and an internal environment that's supporting the work, and an external environment that's going to keep you on track with the work that you're doing.
And back to when we were talking about both of us making and losing money when we were younger, I read somewhere someone was saying it's two completely separate skills to make a lot of money and then keep a lot of money.
100%.
And it is.
100%.
Yeah. I never appreciated that. So I read it and then I was like, holy shit, that's right. I thought that if you could make money, you automatically would keep it, but no, completely different skill.
No, different skill set, because you've got the creation of wealth and the organization and maintenance of wealth, right? And so I can make, but I'm not naturally geared towards the keeping because that requires systemization and so on and so forth. That's why I need partners when I've got businesses. I have partners that know how to make sure that the systems are in place and we're keeping an eye on things, because I'm on to the next thing that I want to create, right? And so we need to ensure that we've got either within ourselves, the other piece of the puzzle, or within our collaborative space, the other piece of the puzzle, which goes again to having the right people around you.
100%. So one thing, and you have a podcast, so I'm sure you get this too, is you get inundated with so many people like, oh, do you want to talk to this person? You want to talk to that person? You don't know these people, but they just, blast you with all these messages. And I remember when I read your bio, I was really impressed by a few things. But one of them was the fact that you amassed and lost wealth several times. And you're a young guy. You're a coach I feel like the coaching industry has so many charlatans that haven't really achieved anything, but they're trying to sell something but they're not really inspirational figures. You're obviously, I don't know you too well, but I'm pretty convinced you're legit on many different levels. You're incredibly intelligent. You're very charismatic. You're a great communicator. You have all these different skills. You have a great story. I mean, you were so wealthy when you were 13. I mean, it's crazy. It's really inspiring to me. Does it frustrate you being in an industry with so many charlatans when you're actually legit?
Yeah, especially when it's, not even just for me. I see people that do really, really great work in the world. They've really got great gifts to share. And yet the market ends up being saturated and bastardized by the people who don't have something to share. Right? Like I've had people that have wanted to work with me, for example, but they can't because they've used their money to work with someone who didn't help them. Or people that they end up coming to work with me because I'm actually having to undo the work that other people have done. And it's sad, but you know what? We're grown-ups. We have to do our due diligence. We have to do our check-in. We have to look at the results and what people are doing and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, like, nowadays is what's so easy. You can buy things. You can buy placement in this magazine and that magazine and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But there are people that are putting the reps in. I'm very fortunate, Oprah called out some of the work that I've done, and I've been able to be a part of the Transformation Leadership Council, Jack Canfield and some of the other leading members in my field, and be amongst them as peers and so on and so forth. And it's easy to look at the surface packaging and all the great marketing, because now it's marketing psychology. You can sell anyone anything, right? If you know how to sell. But what's going on behind that? Is someone trying to sell you on something or trying to get you to buy into something that's going to change them? I think there are different ways that we can look to what that is. But I think in this day and time, we do just need to be a lot more diligent about that, because there was a lot of that nonsense going around.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because for me, looking from the outside looking in, you're incredibly successful. You're incredibly driven and motivated, and you're still very young. I'm 44. Are you late 30s?
Yeah, 39. Going to be 40 this year.
Yeah, so I mean, it's to have that much success. I mean, go figure. If you were making so much money at 13, it's only natural. But for me, it's so impressive. And I wrote this down because I thought I wanted to talk to you about this. There's that story. I don't know if you've heard of this, but a lot of books have talked about this. There was a party by this billionaire, and there was two authors. It was Kurt Vonnegut. I think he was a newspaper wrote for the newspaper, and his buddy Joseph Heller, who wrote Catch-22, the real big bestseller. And the host was a hedge fund manager who was just this insanely wealthy person. So Kurt says to Joseph Heller, he says, does it bother you that this guy just probably today made more money than you're going to make from your royalties of Catch-22 for in perpetuity? And Joe said, I got something you can never have. So Kurt said, what on earth can that be, Joe? And he says, the knowledge that I have enough. And so I know you love what you're doing because I can see your energy. But do you think about that? Like, do you think about where you want to go? Like, what's the end goal? When is enough? Because one thing, I know you seem like a naturally competitive person. You're in jiu-jitsu, you're a successful guy. Most successful people, they have that, the competitiveness. And the risk is that you get caught in the game where it's almost like you're working hard and you're making money that at some point you're not even going to need. Like, I think it's awesome you have that goal. Like you said, you have the goal, you want to get to the $10 million club and you're with those mentors.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to dissuade you. I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about those things? And I mean, you're still young. So, okay, I'd love to.
And there's 2 points I want to bring to that. First and foremost, I don't think anyone should set any goals for themselves, especially ones that are material, until they know themselves. And what I mean by that is you need to understand, am I doing this thing because I'm excited at the prospect of it, or it's a challenge that I'd like to overcome? Or is there some wound that I'm trying to paint over by achieving this? Is there someone I'm trying to prove something to? Do I want to be Johnny Big Socks? Like, what is my reasoning for it? Because a lot of people are coming from a space of creation, from a place of insecurity, ultimately from a place of lack, ultimately from a place of pain, which even if you do get somewhere, you're going to be unfulfilled, you're going to be burnt out, and you're not going to be a happy person. So I think that's the first point. And the other thing, I think it's important to understand that anything that you create has to have a meaning outside of you just having created it. So for me, for example, my ultimate life goal is to be a full-time philanthropist in the next 3 to 5 years. So I do a lot of philanthropy work now. I work on different boards. My siblings and I have got a small limited by guarantee company. We haven't formally incorporated as a charity. We're just operating it for as a non-profit. And we do real projects in a real way in different parts of the world. And we all contribute a portion of what we make into that. We tithe into that, and we go out and do real projects in the world. That's what I want to do full time. So ultimately, there are projects that go well beyond as much money as I can think of as numbers I want in my head. But I'm not doing it to be Johnny Big Socks. I'm doing it because I really am passionate about ultimately having the resources to exercise my freedom of choice into supporting people and be able to have more freedom of choice for them not to have the same problems. And that's ultimately what my goal is. And it's crazy. So I get to hang out with Sir Richard Branson on his private island every year. I've been there a couple of times now. I'm going again. I'm going twice next year. And one of the really cool things about the mastermind that I go with is that Yannick and Sophia, shout to the guys at Maverick, they've got a really great relationship with Sir Richard. So we actually hang out with him a week. We have breakfast with him every day, lunch with him, dinner with him every day. And we get to hang out with him. And I've played chess with him a couple of times. And so I've got like a good few hours of downtime with him. And one of the things I really love about him is he looks at philanthropy through the lens of entrepreneurship. So the same model that he uses when he's building out a new company is how he comes at it when he's building out a new philanthropic effort. And he does it exactly the same way because it's all about essentially creating a moving value. I think the difference between entrepreneurship and perhaps philanthropy is that for me, successful philanthropy is about bringing value to the lives of people who don't yet know how to create it for themselves and empower them to be able to create it for themselves versus giving out handouts to people and making them dependent on you. And that's what I'm very, very passionate about. I call it entrepreneurial philanthropy. One of the projects I've been very, very, very involved in over the last decade in West Africa, for example, and we've really scaled it very well. We're now looking to set up a fund to further scale that and to increase the scope of that into other parts of the world also. As we go into in a rural area, we partner up with local landowners, whether we buy or lease the land from them. We bring in equipment, we bring in skills, we bring in partners for them, and then we start to build out secondary level industries and other industries. And then we teach them to invest back into the local community for power, electricity, clean water, and schools. So they become independent. And then the next generation of kids have got more opportunity. They've got more things that look at you. And we don't take a penny out. Everything just goes in and we're watching it grow. And that's the kind of thing I want to do full time. So in terms of the enough question, as long as there's still problems to solve, I'm going to keep creating for it, but I'm not doing it for me. There's only so many Lamborghinis you can buy, right, at the end of the day. And when you're fulfilled within yourself, you don't even need a Lamborghini anyway, unless you really, really desire it, in which case, buy as many as you need. But have something outside of yourself, something that's of contribution. If you want to have meaning in your life and you want to be satisfied, do something for something more than yourself.
There's so much wisdom there, yeah. And when I said that, Dan, it's because I really like you and I like your energy, and I know you love what you do. So even if you didn't have any other goals aside from I'm going to keep doing this as long as I enjoy it, that's fantastic in itself. I was just curious because I can tell you're a deep thinker. That idea of entrepreneurial philanthropy, I think, is so powerful because there's too many times these like that we're seeing it now with China, and I know America was doing it back in the day as well, where they go into these different countries and they invest, but they stick them with these loans that they can never pay back, and then they're basically tied to this debt forever. And it's like that's almost like financial slavery. And then the other side is where you just keep giving money to people so they don't learn to grow and learn to fish for themselves. Whereas that what you just said is how you really want to help people. It's helping them help themselves ultimately. And
empowerment.
exactly, empowerment. But even then, even the way you live your life now, the way you said you have the people that aren't quite on the level and they can't quite afford it, and you're like, I'll make up the difference. I'll help you. That will, like, that's for me another reason that I love to have money is I want to do nice things for people. I want to help people around me, help them grow, but also help them enjoy life and have fun. I think that's one of the pleasures of money is spending it on experiences as opposed to possessions. Possessions, we all need a roof over our head, but spending it on possessions doesn't tend to be additive. Like you said, there's only a certain amount of Lamborghinis you can buy. I'm not at that level, but when I was at my wealthiest in my late 20s, I didn't even have a car, but because I was focused on other things. But I traveled the world. I live well, but it was just different. Man, you're such a kindred spirit. I know we're running out of time, but I got to ask you. I think one of the reasons that you seem like you have a lot of wisdom is not necessarily just from the books you read and the experiences you have, but it's from the fact that you've traveled a lot and you've lived outside of England. And I think too many people. One of my biggest pet hates is people that are typing on their $1,000 iPhone, drinking their Starbucks about oppression in the US and inequality. And it's like, if you just travel to some of these countries and you see how a lot of, billions of people in this world live, it just gives you this gratitude and appreciation for being like you and I, we grew up in England, we're blessed to be able to travel to these different countries. But how was life, 5 years in Mexico? How do you think you grew as a person, and how do you think your mindset changed from living there?
Well, it was really interesting for me because obviously spending most of the time on our side of, our original side of the pond, there's a very different culture because it's the corner that I was in Mexico is more Americanized than anything else, right? And so also there was a lot of expat reasons, but like I would like to spend time like with the locals, just go to local restaurants and blah, 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 and sit down and jive. And even like my barbers, I go and like sit with them and learn local slang, Mexican, Spanish or whatever. And it's just exposing yourself. And I think there's even things going on in the brain. When you're exposing yourself to new experiences, your brain is actually expanded. It's open to new things, even from problem solving, much to your point, appreciation for what you've got, being clear on what you want to create because you've got more things that you can look at. I think that's just really important. There doesn't even have to be, I think, even that much of an intentionality about what you're going to get from it. Just go out and be in other experiences, be in other environments, be in other cultures, like really bathe yourself in it. Don't just sit in the resort. Go out, just be safe, but go out and meet the local people, talk to them, see what their life experiences are, learn from them, learn with them. I think there's just so much you can get, just enhancing the quality of your life if you do that.
I remember many years ago, I was in Cambodia, and they have the highest percentage of orphans anywhere in the world because they had pretty much a century of different wars and civil wars. And I remember I was at one of those one of the touristy sites, and I was real tired, and there were these kids there, and they were selling trinkets and everything. And I was like, "Oh, can I get a coffee?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, give us some money, and we'll make you a coffee." So I went back to this little house with these two kids, and there were all these old dogs running around, and I was just hanging out with them. And they were just the nicest kids. And I remember thinking, if my life ever got really bad and I didn't want to live anymore, I'm going to get a one-way ticket to Cambodia, and I'm just going to work in an orphanage until I can find meaning in life. Luckily, my life never went that way. But it's that that exposure. It just makes you. It just definitely it makes you a better human. The idea of traveling. And if you can't travel, then at least you can listen to people like you and the wisdom you share. Because Dan, I know I don't know you well, but you're such a kindred spirit. I have a lot of warmth towards you, a lot of admiration and respect. You're just a really great guy, and you inspire me, man. You reinforced a lot of things that I was thinking about, but I hadn't maybe put it into words as eloquently as you. And I just love that idea of where you say 6 figures doesn't impress you, 7 figures, just break it down. Think bigger. When I have conversations with people like you, it really inspires me to think bigger. And I know anyone listening to this, they're going to also think bigger. I know you've got to run. Awesome. Brother, thank you for staying up late. I'll let you have the last word. People and how to get hold of you and how they can have a life of abundance like you.
Just head over to dreamwithdan.com. Everything's there. I write for a couple of magazines. I blog. I've got the podcasts. Free resources as well there. Dreamwithdan.com is the easiest way to find me and everything that's going on. And in terms of just a takeaway, none of us are getting out of this game of life alive. So don't take it all so seriously. Have fun. Go into each day asking what you can pour into it, not what you can take out of it. And remember, again, it's just a game.
And I'm going to send you something, Dan, a video from one of my really good friends, jiu-jitsu. He has this little clip on jiu-jitsu, and he's a real philosophical guy, Nick Gregoriades. And he said, he says, jiu-jitsu is adult play. And ultimately, that's what life's about. It's just play. Too many people, when you see kids, like when we watch our boys, they just play. They're just that natural, that lovely. They're not corrupted by life. They're just young and curious, and they're just playful. And I think if we can keep that as we get older, and jiu-jitsu is a great vehicle for that, it's just going to make us much happier. So I'm so grateful you're a fellow. You're on the jiu-jitsu journey. I'm going to check out more of your work. And Dan, I really appreciate it, brother.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.